Hey folks, welcome to Uncommon Sense in Current Times. I'm here with Dr. Carrie Madej, and uh, she and I were just kind of talking just a little bit before the show. A lot of people know her from some of the videos where she's come out talking about the vaccine and other things with it. But we're going to kind of take it from a different turn. So if you're used to hearing her talk about that, we might touch a little bit on it. So Doctor, just thank you for being on the show. I appreciate you being here.
Thanks, Peter. You can call me Carrie. So
Okay.
happy to be here and excited to talk with you today.
Well, so I'm curious. So you said it before. You've talked about things about the vaccines and about different things that's happened with COVID, et cetera. And so you're you're kind of moving. You're saying you're moving past it. I'm curious to know why are you trying to move past it? I know it's not irrelevant. I know it's not like something you're like, okay, I could just dismiss and just kind of throw off, you know. But what is it about it that you're saying, okay, what is it that you're looking on to next? What are you going for next with?
Well, I think I've done what I'm supposed to do, which was warn people about these injections they falsely call vaccines and what was inside them. I was one of the first people to come out with that. And of course, you take a lot of attacks. I've taken quite a few attacks. And I don't see any new information coming out about it. It's just the same, really, rhetoric. And so for me, I got very depressed about it. You know, I was even looking at things under the microscope, and then I said, that's enough. I mean, it's the same thing over and over. So we need to look at what we can do. And when you really look at this technology, it's not from us. That's my opinion. It's almost like the knowledge, this technology was given to us because the people that have it, they don't really understand it themselves. But I do know, looking at everything, that we need God more than ever before. We need God, divine intervention for this. And so, you know, in everything I do, it's always centered around God anyhow. So I started to look at what can we do. And then looking at that, I'm so excited about what the Bible says about us. And I've seen this in my practice. I've seen this in myself. Miracles are real. The supernatural is more real than this physical realm. But for those people that just can't understand or believe it, they don't have that personal connection. How do you explain it to them? And then I've always loved quantum physics. So I started to get more into associating quantum physics with who we are and what we are, because more science is coming out about it, which is really exciting science. And it also ties in with what's happening around the world, such as CERN, which is the particle collider under Switzerland and France. People don't know what that is. That's something they should look into, because there are many countries coming together. It's a 17-mile wide underground facility where they're taking the tiniest particles and slamming them together. The idea is that they think they can be like God. They think they can create what was there in the beginning of creation, called dark matter.
Right.
And also, these scientists think they can open up portals to other dimensions.
So a couple of things on that. So I'll be transparent. My most of my knowledge of quantum physics comes from the old TV show Quantum Leap with Scott Bakula. But when you're talking about this, them trying to create new dimensions, trying to create that, it's my understanding from everything I'm reading on it that the purpose, the real ultimate purpose of this is that if they can prove that something comes from nothing, then they can disprove God, there was a creator, because all the science seems to now be pointing to the fact there's a creator, whether it's the fine tuning of the universe or whatever it is, that there seems to be something of a creator in it. So what are you finding? Because obviously just they haven't proven anything. So since they haven't proven anything, what are you finding in the opposite is happening that is indicating that there is a God outside of anecdotal miracles, that type of stuff from a quantum physics perspective?
Well, it's simply that, what makes us the smallest particles had to come from something. You can't just create something out of complete nothingness. And that's something that they have a hard time explaining, as well as how did everything just come together? And a simple analogy is, you can have a watch, right? And what if you took apart the watch to the smallest, parts? You put it in a bag and you shook it for billions of years. You open it up. What's the odds of it putting itself together as a watch? Just about none, right? You wouldn't have faith in that.
Right.
How do you have faith that this whole universe, this earth, the intricacy of everything, the way we're created, how in the world do you think that just came out of nothing without a designer and architect behind it? So these are things that they cannot answer, as well as just the way our body's created. When you look at the smallest thing, even our genetic code, a rabbi, a scientist, a rabbi and scientist in the 80s found that there are codes within our genetic makeup. And so there's something that goes throughout every human's entire genome, and it's Yod He Vah He, which is the Hebrew letters for the tetragrammaton of God's name, which is YHWH, if you look at it in English, which is unbelievable, because if you look at the odds of that, it's astronomical. So it's like God put his name over and over and over in our genetic code. There's just so many different things to look at, but if you're a true scientist, you'll realize there has to be a designer, architect, creator behind all of this.
I'm a big fan of John Lennox, Oxford professor, and one of the arguments he makes is, if you're walking along on a beach and someone writes the name Carrie in the beach, you're not assuming that it happens. You assume that there was a designer behind that. You're assuming somebody wrote the name Carrie, and that's that's 6 letters. So when you look at the millions of letters that make up the DNA, how can you assume that 6 letters would come from a creator, but millions of letters would come randomly, by accident? Yeah. And I always just kind of love that argument. And I always think about that argument at times, because unfortunately, people feel that science has explained away God. And in reality, the opposite has been true. Why do you think people are leaning more to that way of saying, well, science is opposite of Christianity, science is explaining away God, when clearly all the evidence is indicating otherwise? And truly, if you're facing anything scientifically, the evidence is actually pointing it, but you're not doing the scientific research. You're looking at a meme saying science kills God. So why do you think that's happening? Why do you think people are sitting there saying, wow, that science has killed God and God is dead and that type of stuff?
Well, because no one thinks anymore. They don't do critical thinking. So they believe whatever's told to them. It's the easy thing to do. And it's also the way that they don't have to change themselves. So when, you're looking at ourselves critically, and that there's someone, your creator out there watching you, that's a hard thing to face for a lot of people. It's much easier to say there's nothing wrong with me. I'm good just the way I am. And also, truth is relative, which is what they teach in schools. There is no absolute truth. And so this way I can do whatever I want, be whatever I want. It's so easy. And I just say, God is not real. And with that simple statement, this is what I think the mentality is of the new generation. There's a brainwashing in the school system, obviously. So we're seeing that, but there's also, the remnant getting stronger as well. So you're seeing 2 different worlds kind of being created in front of our eyes.
It's the wheat and tares growing at the same time. Unfortunately, sometimes you just feel that the tares are outpacing the wheat. It just kind of feels like that at times.
It does feel like that at times. I know.
My children are 19 and 21. They're both in college. My son goes to a conservative Christian university. My daughter goes to a public university. She goes to Auburn. And what was amazing to me is the insidious way that they would try to discount God, discount the truth of the Bible, including in his first week. He was told, we live in a post-truth world, that there's no such thing as truth anymore. And fortunately, I had started working with them a couple of years before they went to college on how to defend their faith. And he asked the question, is that true? Because if there's no such thing as absolute truth, obviously that statement can't be true, and so logically it doesn't make any sense. Well, the professor ultimately got mad at him, eventually in a course of conversation called him a Nazi in front of the class, which Yeah.
The complete opposite of that mentality. Oh my goodness.
My daughter, on the other hand, she went to her first biology class. First homework was, hey, use the scientific method, prove that God doesn't exist. And she called me and she's like, okay, I know the scientific method actually proves that God does exist. So she's like, how do I answer this question? And I was like, well, to me, I said it's real simple. You can either fail here, or you could fail up there. Which one are you going to choose to do? And and so, but it was interesting because she would text me from that biology class and listening to this obviously a very strong atheist professor. But the nice thing about it was at least in your face. It was very obvious, like where he stood, and it was very obvious on like why he was wrong. You know, um, but my son's side of it, the Christian college, it was that little way of doing it. He and I talked about it yesterday. In fact, he was like, he goes, if I didn't really pay attention, he's like, it would be easy to fall for it here.
Yeah.
You
Well,
know,
bravo for you raising your children in that manner. That's where it starts, is in the home. The family unit is one of the most important things that we need to work on. It has to come back. And I do a call to prayers just about every week where it's open to everybody. And I've been, saying these things about family unit and about the father, the man of the house, being the warrior priest. That's how their role was in the Bible, and it needs to come back. About these traditional roles, I think, are important. And it's amazing over the last year seeing so many more men coming up, taking stands, speaking out, where before it was predominantly women. And so this is great. I see a change in a positive way happening in the remnant. So it's a wonderful thing to see.
so that actually kind of ties in with something that you said right at the very beginning, because at the very beginning, we were talking about the vaccine, et cetera. You said you were viciously attacked when I Googled your name. Yeah, they have a lot of creative things to say about you. I'll just say that. So you're dealing with that type of attack because you stood up for something, whether even assuming you were wrong, let's just work on that assumption. You still stood up for something that you were like, this is something I believe in, this is something I think is important, this is something there. And the personal attacks that were presented to you to come there, what helped you get through those attacks? Because I think so many people don't want to be bold because we're afraid, not because we don't have the ability to be bold. They'll be bold. Again, I went to the Auburn, Alabama Iron Bowl game. Everyone in that stadium was bold. I mean, but you go to Georgia when they play Alabama, they're bold. But here, so it's a fear factor. What helped you get through that? So other people who are afraid to be that warrior priest, that don't want to do that, what advice do you give them? Because you lived through it.
Because I have a healthy fear of my father, not of this world. And so they can step on me, kick me around. I was a passenger in a plane crash almost 2 years ago.
Oh, wow.
Character assassination, take away my money, all kinds of things like that. But I'll never go down to their level, because I know this is a blip in the existence of us. I know that we keep going on after this life. And when I faced my father, I couldn't bear to face him if I knew this important information that affects everybody on the planet, and I didn't say something, I didn't speak up. So that's how I see it.
The Demas's family has been in the restaurant business for many generations. We have been serving people in the Middle Tennessee market for 34 years. Try our spaghetti kits, our pot roast, which we slow cook for 4 hours, or our world famous baked chicken and rice soup, which many locals have dubbed Greek penicillin for when you feel under the weather. We make our food fresh, and upon placing our order with us, we freeze the order and send it to your house. Demas's is more than a business. 5 generations of restaurant operators have taught us many things about food, but more importantly, we have recognized that we don't sell food. We sell the experience of bringing people and families together, which our country desperately needs. So go to demasfamilykitchen.com and share in this journey today. And for right now, use the code UNCOMMON to get 10% off of your order. That's demasfamilykitchen.com. I read this weekend, it's amazing sometimes when you read the Bible over and over again, something will just kind of pop out at you that you've like read 100 times, but for some reason you missed it the first 99. And, yeah, and we're used to hearing, the fear of the Lord, the beginning of wisdom is the fear of the Lord, joy begins with the fear of the Lord. But one of the things that I read was Proverbs 8:13, and it was the fear of the Lord is to hate evil, or is to hate, these things. And so we want to ignore that part of it. We're like, oh, well, I just want to make fear of the Lord about respect, not fear of the Lord of, this is the man that spoke the world into existence, and I should hate evil because he hates evil. And if I hate evil, I'm supposed to speak up. I can't get wisdom, I can't get joy unless I deal with that part premise first. So I applaud you for that. I think that's awesome that you were able to do so. But I also know that there's those 2 a.m. moments where you just start thinking, are they all right? Is there a possibility that I'm wrong? Is there this? What did you do in those moments? Did you pray? Did you change to Thanksgiving? Or did you just kind of like water off a duck's back and you're like, I'm done. The plane crash was enough for me. If he didn't take me out there, I'm good. You know,
Yeah, I've had lots of, emotions like anyone else, where I just cried, depressed. You let the threats get to you. People that you wouldn't believe what a lot of us go through, especially in the medical field, if we still speak up and we don't sell out. And I definitely didn't sell out. It's you go through the motions, but then it's like, to me, I have this inner strength, and I would just be with nature. This is how I do it. I just go for walks in nature. I mean, after the plane crash, when I could walk, it took a while, but and I just talk out loud to God. I just say, okay, that's it. I'm thankful for the sun on my face. I'm thankful how the rain nourishes the earth and provides and cleans everything. I'm thankful for, my brothers and sisters in Christ, family and friends. I'm thankful for having food today. I'm thankful for today. I have today. And then after and I look around nature, because I'm in awe like a child all the time. Oh, look at this flower. Look at the colors. Look at this river. Ooh, look at this. And the sunset. And so that childlike awe and wonder, and I keep walking and being thankful until the negative thoughts, they're not in my head anymore, because they're not from God. They're from the adversary. And then, that sets a different scene for me. And then being around, and I don't look at social media a lot, because it's just there to put poison into my brain. It's all lies. So, I mean, let them speak. I know who I am, and the people that know who I am, it's just, we have to expect, when we stand up for what is right and true throughout history. I'm not the only one. This has gone on for a long time, right? But we are not of this world. We are just traveling through this world. And once you become more set apart, it's like you're able to see what it's like to walk in the kingdom of God. I'm practicing, I'm learning how to do that, where we can be in this amazing bubble of his kingdom while this chaos goes around us. And of course, everybody goes through their own fiery trials and tribulations. And I'm a stubborn person, so I guess mine had to be more severe. But every time at my darkest hour, he was there to pick me up. So I have to look at, I was healed miraculously from that plane crash. I should not have lived. I was supposed to be paralyzed. So how can I ever, doubt him, no matter what is going on in my life, because he obviously has a plan. And I think that most people have supernatural experiences in their lives, but they blow them off, or they forget them, or they're pushed away. And so I encourage people to remember them in their lives, or talk about them, because to me, it's more real than this existence. And then if you understand that there is truly life after death, and there is, when you know that, I think most people don't think that's true. Well, if you know that you keep going on, but it's all about real estate, location, where do you go afterward? I think people would start taking their lives a little more seriously, and knowing that, it's not like we just poof, go away. That's not true at all. I mean, the evidence is overwhelming to show, even scientifically, that's not true. And then knowing that you're never powerless, because it doesn't take money to pray. And the research about prayer is wonderful. It is, even we have research to show how retrograde prayer works, meaning people that prayed for people in the past, they did like a placebo or a blinded study. They were just praying for groups of people in the past. When they did this, it was all randomized. They looked at it. Those people, the group that they prayed for, actually were better in the past. So this goes into some quantum physics thing, which most people have a hard time wrapping their head around, but it shows you that God is outside of our realm. He is outside of time and space. Only our realm has this. So it's always in the present to him. So he hears our prayers, and things literally are shaped and molded, and he responds to them. But something that people can wrap their head around is our two research projects. One is the Heart Math Institute, which measures the energy coming from our heart. So the human heart is so powerful. They have many machines that can measure this energy. The average human puts out about 6 feet of electromagnetic energy. So it's incredibly powerful. And that's probably why they wanted us to stay 6 feet away from each other. That's why you bury someone 6 feet under the ground. You don't want them connecting, right? But when a person starts to pray and they get very, a deeply prayerful person, they said, this energy is so big in some people, they don't have the instruments to measure it. It goes out so far. So in a loving state, this is when this energy goes out. And the frequency of love is the highest frequency that we've ever measured, scientifically. And it actually produces something when you're in that state, it's a plasma. So most people are not taught in science. There's 4 states of matter. There's a solid, a liquid, a gas, but then the 4th is plasma. We actually create that. And it's the highest frequency. So it's all science, but it backs up with what God has told us in the Bible. So praying, with that true love, that agape love, miracles happen. And that's what we are seeing. And so when someone is praying, like literally this force field goes out. Plasma is so powerful. It's much more powerful than gravity. It's 10 to the 36 times more powerful. Think about that. That's what really holds up the celestial objects. It's not gravity. So anyway, we produce it. We just don't even know who and what we are. But if you really understand that and think about getting 12 people together who are praying like that or worshiping like that, that's a synergy. It's a powerful force. And to me, that's the physical way of looking at the armor of God. So this is the breastplate of righteousness. This is the shield of faith where you have no fear. You're like David fighting Goliath. You're running and you're like, the odds are against me, but I've got God by my side. And that's that passion that we need, because even if you die, you know that you just wake up and you're in the next existence, right? And if you have that kind of that lion or lioness heart, that force field, instantly things change, because the problem with our society is we've been weakened in little tiny fragile little bugs in a way, because we listen to some talking head that may or may not have any sort of credentials behind it, instead of saying, no, this is not right. It goes against God's law. And who are you to say this? We need to really change the way we are walking and speaking, and just that alone. We don't have to have a magic invention or anything like that. That's what will change the atmosphere instantly. But if you understand that literally you make this, no other, creature that they've ever measured can do this. We're the ones that are made in God's image, this holy temple, and we can choose what inhabits it. We can have the Holy Spirit or something else. And with that, that's when we should walk forward without fear. Everything in the Bible is true. I was just in Israel. I got back a couple weeks ago, and they're uncovering everything you could ever imagine from the Old Testament in the archaeological finds. Oh my gosh, there's no doubt the entire book is true. It's God's showing everybody. It's wonderful to see.
When you think about God being timeless, obviously God, and I think that's where some of the problems that people have with there being a creator is, and I've heard this argument before, I think it's a bad argument, but I've heard it before, which is, well, who created God? Because they're assuming that God has a beginning and an end, and not realizing that that time is not something, that time is not, is it created. It is not something that is real in and of itself, I can change the definitions of time. I can do all that on my own without any problem, outside of, working with other human beings. I can create my own time zone, but no one's going to believe me except for me. But you know, when you think about it, it's so hard because we grow up, especially in the US culture, with time being there's a beginning, there's an end. I have a bedtime, I have a wake up time, I have a go to work, I schedule from this point to this point, and everything we've been ingrained in this. But what's interesting when you look at a Muslim or an Islam way, they see time as circular. They see it as a big circle, and then it kind of goes around and it doesn't ever have a beginning and end. Now, we know that our life here has a beginning and end. The Bible tells us there's a beginning and end, but it also tells us it continues to go forward, you know, in a different area. But the relationship that's currently in existence now, there's a beginning and an end. But it doesn't talk about before or after, because there is no before and after. But when you start really processing it and thinking about it, it's too difficult to grasp, because our only concepts of that would be Terminator 2 and Back to the Future, you know?
Well, in the Bible, there are, by location, Jesus can be in more than one place at the same
Right.
time. We all have that ability because we are all multidimensional beings, but people aren't taught that. Or, translation, translocation, meaning you could just instantly be somewhere else. The Bible talks about these things. So this is why people think, oh, it just has to be, some stories. But let's say time is really important. That's one of the four dimensions, is time space. So time is not what people think it is. If you change the altitude of a clock, the time is different. If you take a clock and fly east, and take a clock and fly west, the time's different.
Right.
So going east or west, the gravitational pull changes time, mass changes time. If you were able to fly to Alpha Centauri, the nearest star, and you could go almost at the speed of light, it takes 4.5 years there, 4.5 years back, that's 9 years. So you're looking at that, you're supposed to be 9 years older physically when you got back, but literally when you come back, you're only 30 days older. I mean, than when you left, meaning you'd be younger than your twin, about 9 years younger. So these are facts, meaning what is time? Time is very malleable. And this is one of the things that I think is important for people to understand about dimensions quantum physics, because what's the real deal with all of these world powers and these evil people trying to manipulate dimensions, CERN? What does that mean? In my opinion, it's to manipulate time, because in the Bible, there's a judgment day. There's an end to the sublease that we gave out to the adversary and all his cronies here on earth. They have
I like that sublease. I like that.
so because Adam and Eve foolishly subleased it. So there's an end point that's coming up soon. So they know God is a God of law and does not go back on his word. God is, what he says is true, right? If he went back on everything he said, he wouldn't be God. So, they know there's a judgment time. But what if they were able to make a time loop, reversal of time, something like that? Then they wouldn't reach their judgment day. In my mind, that's what they're trying to do when I look at all this technology. And so when you're looking at what CERN says they're doing, they even say if they're able to make like a little mini black hole, you could make a loop in time or a reversal of time. And if you look at the mathematics of quantum physics, yeah, that can happen. So time is not what people think. It's not at all. And this is why I believe that, Jesus always warned people about always keeping your oil filled in your lamps, because he's going to come like a thief in the night. And when he comes, you don't have a lot of time. And he says it's going to be similar to Lot's wife. You can't just have time to turn back or do something like that. Because I think when heaven comes to earth, Jesus is heaven. When he comes to earth, heaven does not have time. Hell does not have time, but we do. When heaven comes to earth, perhaps it breaks the hourglass. Maybe wherever you decide to put your life, whatever realm you decide to put your focus in, the fallen world or with our Father in heaven, that's maybe where you are. I mean, these are just some ideas I have, but I'm looking at what are these psychopaths trying to do, because it's so evil. And I'm looking at the microscope and I'm, looking at the world events. And to me, it's about a manipulation of time. And it is a possibility, no matter, even the problem is we don't teach the proper science in schools. If we did, everybody would understand this quite, it would be quite easy, because we have research to prove how this is.
Right.
So this is an important, something important for people to understand.
I look in Revelation and And there's the part in there where he's talking about the Antichrist that you know, and it references it. I know a lot of people have the struggle with it of talking about, you know, basically it's one who was and is to come. You know, it's kind of that there's that reference of who is it in the past that we would all recognize, you know, and so that to me there's something there. So we either have to recognize it from a supernatural perspective that we just all know, or somebody that we recognize who, you know, it was, and I've heard the theory that it's likely Adolf Hitler, because no one would know what Nebuchadnezzar looked like, but everyone knows what Adolf Hitler looks like he is like kind of ingrained in our head. But I don't know, in 200 years will that be the case? You know, I don't know, you know, whenever that's going to be. But regardless, we know that. But no matter how you look at it, whether it's a physical manifestation of the same person, or whether it's supernatural knowledge and knowing who this person was in the past, you know, they're still dealing with that issue of time, and reincarnation isn't the right word, because again, that implies there was an end in time and a rebirth of something, where that is not the situation in this case. It is kind of this again, the cyclical way of looking at time, as opposed to this again linear way of doing it. So that seems to add credence to what you're saying, at least from that section. And it also may explain why we struggle so much in understanding the events of how Revelation works, and you know, and whether there's the post-trib theory and I mean, all that stuff, you can really dig into it. But if we don't understand the premise going into it, and our filter and our lens that we're reading it is completely wrong, no wonder we're confused. Do you think my theory on that is correct, or do you think it kind of corresponds with what you're saying?
100% yes. I mean, this is why people they read the Bible, but they're like, these aren't concepts they're taught at all, and so they're just like, this can't be possible, right? But if we really taught the true science, I mean, it makes the Bible more alive. I mean, we totally get it. And in medicine, I can tell you that so there's supernatural events that occurred in the hospital, my clinic, and they were always blown off by the medical community as maybe spontaneous remission, and they would hide the story. They would never talk about it. And I had patients we would do codes on. They were dead for 25, 35 minutes and come back alive. They would tell their stories of what happened to them. And at this time in the hospital, they would ridicule them. They would tell them it was wrong, sometimes put them on sedatives. So the thing is, the society has suppressed and oppressed this in us. But if we started to really talk about them, because the evidence is overwhelming about you know what we can do and why this can happen, because we're not just a blob of cells like they want you to believe. We are so much more than that. We have a spirit and a soul, and we have this energetic field. We're light beings. We emit light. We emit electricity and magnetism. They don't want you to know about this. Like, for instance, pH. You know, everybody says, "Yeah, I'm too acidic." You know, you probably heard this. Well, acidity and pH was they made up that term or that value because they didn't want the people to know that they have voltage. So voltage and pH are the same. They just didn't want anyone to know they have voltage in their body. So this is how they hide who and what we are. So if you're too acidic, you know, you don't have a lot of energy or voltage in your body. And if you drank a little baking soda, you're more alkaline, and you balance it out, and actually the electrical impulses actually flow better in your body. And this is why people feel better. They have a little more energy and maybe less pain and that sort of thing. But we're just not taught the right things. And when people say, "Oh, that's not true," I said, "Well, how do you have static shock? And why do you think we have an EKG that measures the electrical impulses of your heart, an EEG, which is measuring the electrical impulses of the brain?" And there's many more examples than that. But if we understood this, then we understand that this is how we can heal ourselves too. So this is a new paradigm of healing. So we can heal from light and frequency and sound. And the Bible talks about that too. You know, using music and using the cadence, you know, walking around Jericho and blowing the shofar. There's a science behind that too, why the walls would fall. This is fascinating because we don't need something really fancy if we understand about sound and light, and how real music affects, you know, the health and the environment. And I love Dr. Masaru Emoto. That is one of my favorite researchers. He studied water and he looked at water crystals and he saw that they're all different. And you could, if especially children have the pure heart, praying over water could change the crystalline structure of water from something that was chaotic to something that was a beautiful structure. And each word had its own crystal. So, negative words, bad words, evil, you make me sick, actually produce a really distorted crystal a structure. And a distorted structure makes distorted function and not good function. But when you had, I love you, you're beautiful, things like that, it would be a beautiful structure, therefore good function. This is just us talking, speaking, writing a word, praying. And if you understood the magnitude of how you are really made in his image, meaning we are co-creators with him, we create what happens in our body, we create in others and in our environment. It shows how prayer from a distance can work. So these are things that people should be teaching kids and teaching themselves. And I keep those water crystal pictures around because it reminds me to not be in a negative mood, to stop saying negative words, which is really hard in our society. We're taught these things, or even those little sayings like, oh, drop dead gorgeous or serious as a heart attack. These are awful. These are speaking curses over ourselves. So our words are powerful, just like the Bible has said, the sword of truth, and our words cut through the chaos. So in the life and death in the tongue.
So I want to get clarification. When you're talking about crystals, you're not talking about, and I know this, but this is really for the audience. You're not talking about, going to the little crystal shop in the strip center and using a crystal to heal yourself or doing anything of that nature. That's not when you're talking about the water crystals.
No,
that's not what you're referencing. And I want to make certain when
we make crystalline structure in our bodies. We do. Okay. So water makes a crystalline structure. Water is life. Water is miraculous. And water is one of the three witnesses on earth, according to the Bible: the water, the spirit, and the blood. And all three are in agreement. And actually all three make plasma, by the way. That's the fourth state of matter. So it all ties back together, But look at Dr. Masaru Emoto's work. But most people will agree, oh yeah, no two snowflakes are alike. Well, that's what we're talking about. They make structures. Yeah. Most other substances on earth always make the same structure when it's frozen, same structure. Not water. It changes because water holds memory. Water does all kinds of things. It's very healing in many different ways, but it can hold something that's just like our bodies. It can hold something that's a negative information or a positive information. So it's fascinating, but just look at his work, Emoto, and it's amazing. And other researchers have replicated this. So this is not just, his kind of crazy findings. It's true science. It's pretty exciting.
So, I was miraculously healed as well. I had a severe heart issue that I was supposed to still be on medication. I was still supposed to, all these issues with it. And I remember talking to my pastor about it. And I said, there's no rhyme or reason of why it comes. And he says, well, the fact there is no pattern is a pattern. He's like, so you need to attack this both medically and spiritually. And so I started looking at healing ministries online. And there's crazy people in both directions on that. There really are. I mean, there's some people out there who are insane in both directions. But I found that he's a friend of mine now, but I found his name is Art Thomas, and he teaches healing ministries. And I was listening to his stuff, and I was just kind of understanding it, basing it into the Bible. And I ended up having to fly to the Cleveland Clinic, and my condition was completely gone, off medication. I mean, everything with it from there. So I understand that 100%. But what's amazing to me that what Art teaches, and one of the things that he says is when he teaches, and he teaches healing ministries. He's not just the Benny Hinn, smack you on the head type thing. He doesn't do that. It's literally simple. It's very biblical. It's very sound, biblically based. But he says that when he teaches children to pray for healing, they are much more successful than adults. And when I brought him here, and we went to a medical clinic for him to teach it there, he told me that medical clinics have a harder time with it, and they have a lower success rate because they overthink it, and they're trying to think it through the healing. So I know the cause, so I'm going to pray for the cause, as opposed to as opposed to just God enter the situation and heal the person. And so it's fascinating to me that medical doctors have a lower success rate on it, and children have a higher success rate on supernatural healings. And when you said that, that was fascinating to me, how the children could pray over water. Because frankly, if you asked me to pray over water, I would be kind of like, okay, I believe it, but this seems too weird. I mean, like I would start
It's a
questioning
belief,
myself.
just like the Bible says. Jesus told the woman who touched the hem of his garment, your faith has healed you. It's your belief, right?
Right,
Because he didn't heal her. Didn't know what she was around. She's grabbed his hem because she believed.
right,
It wasn't just simply because usually, he had a one-on-one with the person, right? When the healing happened, and he could not heal everybody. People are surprised by that. In his own hometown, he was very unsuccessful because people didn't believe who he was, because they're like, I know you, I grew up with you,
right.
you know?
It's also neat to me that, the four people that lowered them through the roof, it wasn't the guy, it wasn't the paraplegic that was lowered through the roof. It wasn't his faith. It was the four of them whose
Yes.
faith healed that person. And
Yeah.
that's when Jesus looked at them and he said, your faith has healed him. I mean, that to me is always so fascinating. So it's not dependent upon the individual whose faith is there or not. There's so many factors involved in it, including God's conditional and unconditional will. There's too much. And I think it's so easy for people on the outside to look at this and say, oh, well, I prayed for my sister's healing of cancer and she died, so I'm never going to believe anymore. I mean, it's easy to
So
do
much
that.
more than that. We're accountable and responsible for ourselves.
Right.
People have free will. I tell people this is the greatest gift he's ever given us, is free will. And they don't get it because I think instantly everything should be healed. I said, well, then we would be like robots or just a lower animal. I said, it's going to be hard because to be given more responsibility comes, a lot more hardships as far as when we're learning to do this, because if we're made in his image, oh my gosh, we have to understand what that is. But free will means even apathy. Apathy is closest to death. And that means you don't care what happens to you. You're like, yeah, pray for me. I mean, if you have that attitude, well, likely nothing's going to happen.
Yeah.
We have to understand that we are responsible for ourselves too, and how we speak, and that God's not just going to just wave his hand and make everything okay, because he wants us to grow up spiritually. To me, he plans to return us to Eden, heaven and earth, right? So that means we have to be grown-ups to handle it, because in the beginning, Adam and Eve were supposed to suppress and take care, be guardians and caretakers of Eden, and they subleased it to the adversary. They believed his lies. So I think this time God's like, okay, I'm going to have heaven on earth, return to Eden. But who's going to be up for the charge? Who's going to be up for that? That means we have to unlearn what the fallen world has taught us, be set apart, and start learning from the word about how to be and how to walk with him, and in how to be, that, like, having that King David's heart, but also have the loving kindness, how to balance that. So that's how I see it. This is my opinions. This is how I explain hardships and fire trials, but I've been through lots. So I definitely, when I'm speaking this, it's not just from theory. I've gone through it myself. So yeah.
In Acts 5, we see that when Peter and the other disciples were ordered to stop talking about Jesus, they responded, "We obey God and not man." In 2020, we saw something we never thought we could see in this country. They shut down our churches. After decades of removing God from schools and public institutions, they went straight at our community. Unfortunately, we as Christians did not know what to do, and even worse, we chose to listen to false prophets masquerading as Christians on how to respond. I recognize this is the only beginning, and we need to know how to respond. We have a duty to say no to unjust laws, but as Christians, we have a greater duty to God. In my book on the duty of Christian civil disobedience, I use biblical teachings to help believers know when and how to stand up to those in charge when they ask us to commit evil. You can go to peterdemas.org to find out about our duty to say no. And when you type in the code UNCOMMON, you can get 10% off your order. That's uncommon at peterdemas.org. Remember, we are to obey God and not man.
So were you a believer before the plane crash?
Yes.
Okay. But this just kind of, I guess, sealed it or made it more.
I feel like it shook the snakes out of the tree in a way.
Okay.
Um, but I was told 26, almost 27 years ago, by God, it was an audible voice. He said, "You will not die in a plane crash. That's not how you will leave this world." And I knew this was a knowing in my being. And so then I got a little cocky after that, I'll have to say, because I was like, yeah, I'm not going to die in a plane crash. So I'm like, I don't care. I'll fly in this little plane that looks kind of crappy. But I mean, honestly, I look back, I'm like, what was I doing flying in some of these things? You know, if I had a chance to fly in something, right? And well, and so this time it was when the plane had engine trouble. A lot of things went wrong. A lot of things that flight that should not have happened. But anyway, I remembered him saying I would not die in a plane crash, and I was praying the whole time. But so that helped me not really freak out because this was not normal. But then I realized, wait a minute, he didn't say I wouldn't be in the crash. Oh no, this is going to hurt really bad. Never entered my mind that part, right? Like, oh. So, and it was, I'll tell you, just a miracle because everything went white and then my spirit came back and then one sense came back at a time. And then I went into doctor mode, but, and then many miracles happened after that. So yes, I knew that there's no doubt that he was there the entire time. And thank goodness he gave me those words were in my mind over and over as it was going on, because it took a while for that crash to happen. It was not instant. It was at least 7-8 minutes long.
Oh my goodness, that's
The whole
terrifying.
time, which is an eternity when you're up there, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, it's, sometimes he gives us and everybody says, well, I don't get anything like that. I said, well, and you haven't had anything extreme in your life either. So like a plane crash. So maybe you should be thankful for that. But I think if we look for the little signs he gives us, maybe you're thinking a verse and someone says it later that day, or there's a word or something that comes to your mind, you see it on a billboard or just something nothing's a coincidence. If you see that and you're like, thank you, you acknowledge it, you get more and more and more. If you just open your eyes to the things around you, I think people will start seeing it more and more. And that belief makes more things happen. Again, it's that belief. So it's a practice. We have to walk it and practice it and see that it happens. Or if you don't have that faith yet, be around some people that do. That's why I love having the online call to prayer. There's a lot of people that have that fiery passion and they're praying for people. And then over the time, people are saying, wow, I really started to I see it now. I'm feeling it. I'm feeling that faith. And we can learn from others too. So it's not like it just comes naturally and one day you have this faith. I think it's a relationship, and it's a always ever growing pattern, a relationship with our Father. So, and I'm still learning every day.
I've had people say that to me. I don't hear God speak to me or whatever, and I'm like, then you're not reading the Bible. I mean, he speaks to you every single day. He's already spoken so much to you through his word. It is incredible to me that when you read your Bible systematically, how the problems that you're facing will appear in what you're reading. And again, sometimes it's not what you're seeing, etc. I watch God speak in so many different avenues, but he also in other ways, like I've gone for those walks in nature. And I remember one time I was kind of on a ridge and I was looking down this gorgeous house. And I was jealous. I was like, I want a house like that. It has this yard. I mean, it was just there. And this eagle started flying overhead.
Wow.
And I kept looking up, and eventually it kind of sort of leading me down the path. And I recognized God was saying, I don't want you looking down at this earth. I want you looking up. And it was that kind of that realization then of how that plays out. And so he does talk in so many different ways, but you're right. I don't think we open our ears. We don't listen to God. We just assume that it's going to be in our face and it's going to be loud and noisy. And that's not the way he communicates. It can be loud and noisy. A plane crash probably was a little loud, but, but it doesn't always end up being that way. And I think people have a hard time understanding that and understanding that peace that comes from it.
Yeah. And then I like the Psalms because when I first read them, I was like, wow, I can't believe, David's so angry, he's doubting God. But it's great because it speaks for us, because it goes through the gamut of emotions we have. And it's something that for me, I can really connect with, and have, no matter what I'm feeling that day, I'll find a psalm that fits it. And they're so eloquent and beautiful. So I think those are good things for people to look to if they never read the Old Testament, which a lot of people haven't. And I tell them that the Old Testament has so many prophecies about these days right now. So you're missing out on a ton. If you think only Revelation, you're getting almost just a teeny smidge of the information. The entire book is talking about these days and the instruction manual. And when you do that, wow, things are so much different. And you see the plan, and it gives you even more hope and faith to go on. But you have to read it on your own, because I don't think the traditional churches really do that much. They're restricted on what they teach. And I see we're going to go back to tents and barns and people's homes. And each one of us has the ability to teach. It's just we're reading it to each other, right? And I was able to go to a woman made a worship barn around here, and some young people made some songs, worship songs, within 2 days, helped each other, and they sang their hearts out. And I'm telling you, wow, it was amazing in there. The love, and God was present. And I tell people, music definitely breaks chains. So if you're feeling like you just can't connect, sing, play instruments, or listen to people that are doing that. That's a way to really break through the chaos really fast.
Isaiah says that he puts on the garment of praise for the spirit of heaviness. So when you're kind of depressed, that's when I kind of get to that kind of down, depressed, emotionally dark part of me, I turn off all news. I don't even listen to stand-up comedy, which it'll make me laugh, but usually stand-up comedy is negative in nature. That's why it's kind of funny. I only listen to either sermons or Christian music. It's and I really focus on everything that I could possibly do. And it is amazing the peace that comes from that just usually 1 or 2 days. And even like when my wife and I are fighting, I'll start writing positive things that she did the day before, and it's amazing how much better she gets without knowing. It has nothing to do with her, but somehow your attitude starts to change, that those feelings start to change, about it. And then all of a sudden, like the bickering we were doing over stupid stuff just went away. Like it
Because
just
you guys
goes
are
away.
communicating, even if you're not talking. Remember that
Right.
energy from the heart goes out. So you're literally still talking to each other, even though you're not saying a word. So that's why, what you're doing was right, because you're changing your mindset. You're putting out a different energy. And of course, it's going to be felt, by the other people.
Well, and that also explains, and I've had to explain this to my kids too, why they're like, well, why aren't I friends with these people, all that other stuff? And I'm like, you don't understand. Their spirit's rejecting your spirit. Yeah, I know they look like fun and they look kind, etc., but their spirit's rejecting your spirit. You need to be thankful that your spirit got rejected by them, but that's why like people hang out with like people. We call it cliques, but in reality is you got kind of those dark, depressed people that like to hang out with each other and complain and grouse, and then you got the cheerleading kind of people that are kind of around, and Christians. But when I became a Christian late in life. Most of my friends went away. Like they just kind of disappeared. And the friends I have now are uniquely different. I mean, and like I wouldn't have been friends with them before, and I know that. Like some of them I thought they were weird 15 years ago,
Yeah.
and now all of a sudden I find them very close, and I'm very, so you're absolutely correct. And the more you get, it's you recognize it without recognizing it. Dogs, how they recognize other dogs with it's kind of the same type of way. And I'm not trying to call us dogs in that fashion, but it's that same type of feeling. You mentioned the 6 feet. The verse that keeps coming to my head is when 2 or more gather to pray, on it. That also seems like you're combining the energy more in that situation. And it kind of makes me wonder if that's kind of tied in with that verse as well. Because it doesn't mean that just we have 2 people, so it's going to happen. If there was one, it wouldn't. But I just kind of wonder if are you magnifying the prayer when 2 or more come?
Yeah, it's a synergy. They've measured the energy too. Not that science has to prove it, but it just helps you boosted up. And then, again, I tell people this, I'm going to do the right thing no matter what, but it's been a really hard road. But the second I have one person standing by my side, just having my back, wow, does my courage get better? Does my faith even get stronger, even though it was, just having one person beside you that you're not alone. I think that's one of the biggest things right then and there. And then, of course, with that amount of faith and belief, the Holy Spirit is just drawn there. But of course, you can do it just by yourself. But we are, we're social creatures, really. We're supposed to not just be all alone. And we're the body of Christ, so we're not supposed to be out. The body works with the rest of the body, right? So we all have our own unique gifts, and that's why we're all, I call it in a loving way, misfits or peculiar people, because we are just unique, and that's good. We're not carbon copies of something out there, what the media tells us to be. And when people are just more in their own the comfortable to be themselves, this is when we have such a wonderful world and makes the body of Christ stronger. And I love that it's the kind in certain groups, at least the ones I'm in, it's encouraged to be that way, versus if you go to some of these traditional, well, we don't want to say that, or we don't want to do that, or we don't want to talk about that subject now. Oh, don't do that, Carrie, you're going way out there now. Yeah.
So if people want to know more about you, how do they find out, how do they learn more about kind of this type of stuff that you've been talking about? Where would they go?
My website's just my first and last name.com. And you can sign up to be on the newsletter, and we have weekly call to prayers. And then also I have a Tuesday Tribe Talk where we go over all kinds of great information from wide variety of sources. And we also pray together. And so you do Q&A. So it covers the gamut of how to be healthy naturally, alternative ways to be healthy, to how to be free in this society, how to break away from the digital currency system. We're talking about all kinds of different topics there. So we come like a family over time. So that one is a paid prescription, but have to keep the website going. It takes money for that.
Right.
And I do that, and I work with the 5 docs. There's 5 of us, and we're doing right now called a boot camp. So these are different topics that we cover for 6 weeks, and it's about making the new paradigm. When we walk into what we feel is God's kingdom, we have to do something different, new than what we're doing now. So that is how we're thinking, eating, what is spirituality, all these things. And then we'd say, what is the old paradigm? So this is how we see the new paradigm, and what is the research based on that too. And so it's really about giving people the tools that they can use and start applying to themselves and their communities. That's the whole idea, is don't just do what we say. We want you to think about it and start doing these things in your community. If you just do little baby steps, you're going to make so much of a difference right there. And then you can teach the younger people. So that's the idea.
That sounds wonderful. Well, Carrie, I thank you so much. Not just for what you're doing and for coming on the show, but really just being an example of somebody who can stand up, stay strong, who can speak out for God and kind of just and be a watchman on the wall. And I thank you for all of that. You're right. It's an encouragement to others, and I think boldness yields boldness. And so you may not recognize the fruit that's coming from it, but I can assure you it's out there. And I know a lot of times we plant the seeds and we want to eat the fruit ourselves, but sometimes it just doesn't happen. And so I can just assure you that it is happening out there. And I thank you so much for all that and all that you're doing.
Well, thank you. And thank you for what you're doing. Raising a family, it's what we need, those strong young men and women, and that your son and daughter is able to question. What a breath of fresh air. That gives me a lot of hope. So thank you to you and your wife for doing that, because these young people are going to make a huge change. So thank you.
I appreciate it.